Welcome to First Issues. Grief is a universal human experience that we all go through. The loss of a family member, the loss of a dear friend, or even the loss of a colleague. Even though this is an experience that we all go through, it is yet to be accommodated in such a way that supports healing, especially at the workplace, where corporate culture is often inhospitable to people suffering profound loss. Managers and everyone else come to work prepared to celebrate births and birthdays, and even to deal with illnesses. But when it comes to death, they fall silent and avert their gaze. The default approach is to try to spare the office from grief, leaving bereaved employees alone for a few days and then hoping they'll return expediently to work. This is outside of the estimation that grief-related losses total more than $75 billion annually, and yet companies have resisted bringing this discussion into the workplace. Data suggests that the cost of implementing even a few changes is less than that price tag and will ultimately reduce loss of productivity and valued employees. So what are these changes and how can they be successfully implemented?
The topic of grief, as you said, is really universal. Why we don't like talking about it, I'll talk from the African context, is maybe because we've been socialized of not talking about the people who are gone. We say we let them rest. And there's also a bit of fear of talking about grief because we think that we are going to trigger emotions that you'd rather let them rest. Maybe that's why we don't like to talk about it, but it is important to talk about it because when you don't talk about it, we cannot process. We need to face the emotions. We need to feel the feelings. If it means crying, if it means screaming, whatever the way of processing grief must happen. And loss is not just because of death. Loss becomes about because of many things. Loss of work, loss of items, loss because of divorce. And maybe today I'd like us to talk about death and divorce, and we look at how that loss affects us.
I want to talk further about tiptoeing around issues, right? So let's now come back to the workplace.
Yes.
You know, we celebrate a lot of things. We celebrate births, we will celebrate people's birthdays, we will celebrate an achievement somehow. And that whole experience is humanized.
Yes.
But then when it comes to loss or grieving, it is not such a hospitable experience for the person who's going through that. So my question is, how can that whole experience be humanized in a way that the person feels like they are accommodated in what they are experiencing?
The loss of death. Humanizing it is just realizing that the person going through this experience is in a totally different space. And when it comes to workplace, I believe that we should create spaces that allow people to express how they are feeling. But before we go to the person, how they are feeling, is the people surrounding them, us who are giving the grieving person support. How do we behave? Do we come to the person and say it's well? No. Do we come to the person and say they have gone to a better place? No. Do we come to a person and say we will see them again? Hotasiama. No. We come to the person and allow them to express how they would like us to support them. Sometimes they just want company, for you to keep quiet and to know that they are there for you. That's how you humanize it. But also give people space when they are ready to talk. We don't give our input, but we let them. Some people go through what we call normal grieving. You know, the ones you go through the 5 stages of grieving, which is anger, first is denial, anger, bargaining, depression, and then acceptance. They follow that process. Others close it up and it becomes complicated as they prolong this process. There is also others who do not show any emotions at all, even for a very long time. That doesn't mean that they are not grieving. And it's important, whether it's in church, community, family, or at workplace, to avail that space. And I believe that is how we humanize it.
So, Wairimu, you just touched a bit on, the normal grieving process, and I would like for us to just hone a little bit into that. What are the stages of grief that people just normally go through?
There are 5 stages of grieving, and the first stage is shock and denial. When you hear a loved one has passed on, you're like, no. That cannot be. And so you are in a space for some time of denial. You're expecting that you wake up. You hear people saying, I think I'm walking through a nightmare, or I think the person will come back. That is the first stage. The second stage is anger and frustration. Frustration with death, or frustration with God, or frustration with so many other things. You are in a space of anger. And I don't know whether you've seen people who've lost a loved one and they are very angry. Number 3, you go through bargaining. You're bargaining. Maybe, you're trying to offer your prayer, hoping that the people can come back. Number 4 is depression. When you realize that the person is gone, is not coming back, you bargained, you go through these feelings of hard grief and depression. And number 5 is acceptance. When the memories of the loved one become something that you cherish.